Hey, MBA hopefuls. We are on air with MBA Waves, your weekly broadcast talking all things business and education. Welcome to this 122nd episode where we're talking with UVA Darden School of Business. We're going to learn things you need to know about Darden, get students' perspectives, and of course, precious admissions tips for cracking round two. Please don't forget to click the like button if you enjoyed today's episode, and be sure to click subscribe for tons of free tips and to get up and close and personal with some of the world's top ranked business schools. I'm your host for today, Krithika Srinivasan, joined by my co host Bara. Hi, Bara. And,
Hello.
and it's a privilege to be introducing four guests joining us today from Darden. We have Merav Frasier, if you can just wave, who is a Senior Associate Director of Global Recruitment at UVA Darden. We have Joey Howard, MBA candidate at the University of Virginia Darden School of Business. We have Ines de Estrada, MBA candidate at the University of Virginia Darden School of Business and a Forte Fellow and an Impact Fellow. We have Alyssa, who's an MBA and MBP candidate at the UVA Darden School of Business, and Frank Patton School of Leadership and Public Policy, and also a Forte Fellow. A very big welcome to you all. Thanks so much for joining us today. So,
Thank you.
kicking it off with Merav here, what's new and exciting at UVA Darden?
Yeah, so a lot of things new and exciting at Darden. Most recently, we received another very generous donation from an alum, which brings his gift total to over $100 million. And this will be not only for our botanical gardens that have already been laid out, but also for AI initiatives and potentially a residential college as well, some housing units. So really exciting front. We also have additional cases constantly being brought out and new changes to the curriculum, making sure that our students are getting a global perspective. What changes have you all seen in the curriculum or at Darden in your time here?
I know there are a handful of new professors teaching core this year who have been outstanding. I haven't had them, but the first years who had them have told me that they're some of their favorite professors they've had, which at Darden is a huge compliment because the professors, to me, kind of make the school. So saying that there's new professors who are continuing that legacy, I think is a huge, huge addition.
I think also a lot of second years are in some electives that are newly brought by professors. And so having these new cases very much up to speed, up to date to whatever's happening right now in the business world is impressive to see.
It sounds great. I mean, I think Joey, you're right. Like the professors totally make the school for sure, but that money coming in, supporting all of you, also makes things a lot easier for everyone. I'm curious if you could talk about, when you think about Darden, you really think about the case method and first coffee in the cupola in Saunders Hall. Those are the things that come to mind. So what are some of the standout unique features of the Darden MBA itself? So one of you can take this away and let us know.
I can start. So I think you mentioned the case method, and I think the essence of that is that you're in class and you don't have one professor kind of telling you how to think or what to say, but you have 69, 70 other students who you're learning from different industries, different sectors, different countries. And so it's not just learning from the great faculty that we have, and they're amazing and they're always willing to open their doors and give time to you, but also all of your classmates who have such various experiences and backgrounds and can really enrich what you can take out of this MBA program.
I think the case method also helps you get yourself in the mindset of having to think about a problem and trying to find solutions. You talk it through, you think as if you're the CEO, as if you're that general manager that is having an issue. Can we get ahead of it? How can we make it better? What are some of the potential risks we're considering? And so that thought process becomes something so natural in the classroom that every student sort of goes through as we prep and as we're sitting in class.
What about first coffee? What's that about?
Darden sets up a lot of opportunities like First Coffee for students to really develop those networking skills. That's something that's really important as they're going through their MBA process and recruiting experience. So First Coffee is one of those traditions where it not only creates community, which is something that we also value here at Darden, but allows them a chance to connect with their peers, with upperclassmen, with faculty, with staff, and develop those networking and relationship building skills.
Right, the soft skills that are really important.
And you do get coffee too, right? So,
right? What kind of coffee? Do you get like fancy coffees, or is it just decaf and regular?
Decaf regular, but we do have some like mix-ins that you can put in. There's also really good teas, there's hot chocolate. And First Coffee is also just an opportunity for there to be like maybe announcements or special guest speakers or company sponsors. So sometimes we get extra treats. Wednesdays we get croissants, so that's the best day of the week. Croissant Wednesdays are a highlight. But sometimes we even just have like performances, like our cold call chorus will sing if it's like the holidays, or they'll do a fall concert. So it's really just an opportunity for community gathering. In addition to some of other great traditions like having sections and Darden Cup and a lot of others.
Yeah, and we got to experience First Coffee a little bit when we visited Darden. So we know like how it is the entire business school comes together. So I'm sure it's pretty something that everyone looks forward to. And when we think of MBA, it's always about the right fit. There are so many fantastic programs out there, but everyone has its own flavor, like your coffees and teas, hopefully, for the tea people. And a lot of it boils down to this culture, especially of Darden being so collaborative and so on. So please tell us more about your experience of the culture at Darden.
Yeah, I can start.
Yeah.
So the thing I think that is really cool about Darden, and maybe that sets Darden apart from a lot of other MBAs, is that Darden really happens here in Charlottesville. I mean, we do the global course, so you get to go to some other country and learn from industry leaders there. But other than that, I mean, people don't want to go away for the weekend, even like to go to a wedding, because they would rather spend time here with their classmates. And like, you don't want to miss out on the education part of Darden, but also just the social side is really fun. And so to me, like, Darden is a place where you come to Charlottesville and you never want to leave. And I think, we're not in a big city, so if you're looking to for some very lavish dinners, and I mean, we have great food in Charlottesville, but not like maybe necessarily some other cities. There's debate about this. But I think that the really cool thing about Darden is that the students really come here to learn from their peers and learn from their classmates, and then build friendships and relationships.
And I think for me as an international student, that was so important in terms of thinking, okay, I want to go somewhere that I can connect with the people around me, and that people will want to connect, will want to stay for the weekend and not go to the wedding. Like, so it's those things that just make a difference, because you actually get to spend time with your peers. We also have a bunch of events happening all the time, which include my personal favorite, which is Darden Cup. And that sometimes happens in the weekends. And so moving away or going for a weekend somewhere else does mean that you miss some things that make you more connected to the community around you. And so it just incentivizes everyone to just stay around, to connect, to make these even just social gatherings at a winery around here. It's just so many different things that can happen throughout the weekend that just make this a very much like community that's gathering and collaborating all the time.
Right. And you mentioned, did someone want to say something more about?
I totally echo that. And just to confirm, it's not lip service. Every time someone offers something out of town, or there's like a trip that we have to plan, I always check my calendar to see if I would be missing some huge Darden event. So it's totally true. And I think to both Ines and Joey's points, the people who want to come to Darden opt into that community and opt into that kind of academic rigor that is built, and like the foundation is learning from each other, both in and out of the classroom. So it's that mindset that I think we all share, and we bring our different flavors to it. But the fact that we've all kind of chosen that is what I think makes Darden really special.
Feels like that falls parallel with just being in this really charming town of Charlottesville, right? You've got, like, when I think about Northern California, I'm near San Francisco, which is great. But when I go to some of the smaller towns, like, there's a different feel among, you go into a restaurant, there's a different feel between the people that work there and the people who are going. I'm the outsider. But when you're in the inside of these smaller towns and smaller college towns, I mean, Charlottesville is, I don't know how big it is offhand, but it's not tiny. It's small, but right? But it's not. And so you really get to be part of the culture, and that first coffee and all these things you're talking about wind up getting, I would imagine, just really blended with that feel. So Inez, you're getting a real taste of Americana here, right? Is there anything that surprised any of you? Maybe Inez, you, because you are not from, where are you from?
I'm from Argentina, from South America.
Right. So asking you, like, is there any surprise? And then for the other folks that are here, was there any surprise about being in a town like Charlottesville?
I think for me, when people say college town, I'm imagining something very small with, if you want, limited amount of things around. And I was very impressed that you have everything in Charlottesville and that like you don't lack for anything. And I think I just imagined in my mind, don't ask me why, like just the breeze going by and not many people walking around. Thank you. And suddenly you're in this like vibrant, filled with things going on all the time, filled with a lot of a young population because it's a college town, as well as sports event every weekend. And then add to that, you've got a huge food scene. Then you have a lot of artists and like entertaining happening in the weekend. And so suddenly you're somewhere that has everything you need, but also gets you connected to the students that are living this experience with you. You get to go to football games and suddenly like you see that whole Charlottesville has stopped just for that football game. And then you go to the supermarket and people smile at you and ask you, how's your day going? And there's this also like, call it small town aspect to it that just makes you feel so welcomed. And it's been surprising to see in a very happy way.
Yeah, I love that about small town feel. Anyone else surprised because you came from a different part of the States maybe about Charlottesville?
I also went to UVA for undergrad, so it's been an interesting experience coming back more of an adult. I think I'm surprised at just how much there is still yet to discover, even after having gone here for 4 years. I think being in a different stage of life, different income level now. So just like being able to still experience new things with my classmates who are experiencing Charlottesville at the same time for the first time. Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Joey. Go ahead.
I grew up in New Hampshire, which is much, in my mind, smaller than even Charlottesville. So for me, I mean, I lived in Boston. I've lived in big cities, so it's not like I like came out of like a tiny village and came to the big city of Charlottesville. But yeah, but for me, I really wanted to be in a place that had a lot of nature and was like very beautiful because I wanted to go, similar to where I grew up in New Hampshire. And I will say, I think Charlottesville is prettier than my hometown, which is like the highest praise I could give to this place. And I'm looking outside and we're seeing like beautiful fall foliage still, which I think in my hometown there was snow today. So that's another big perk of being in Charlottesville.
Yeah, we do get all 4 seasons, and yes, to the truest form, like cold winter.
But you don't get snowstorms like Krithika and I did in Ann Arbor.
No.
You have a little bit of a respite from that sort of the snowmageddon, which is pretty intense. Is there? I'm throwing a little curveball here. Is there a food item that everyone? It's like you go to Charlottesville and then you get the thing. Is there a thing like that there? What is it?
One of them is Bodo's. You have to get a Bodo's bagel. I think it rivals any New York bagel in town. Yes. Yes. So Bodo's bagels are a must in Charlottesville. Where else is it?
Apple cider donuts.
Yes. Yeah. Carter's Mountain apple cider donuts. That's another great one.
Mine isn't as like cliche as the other 2 that we've listed. Like those are like, you come to Charlottesville, this is what you get. There's a pastry shop called Mary Bet, and they're almond croissants. I've never had an almond croissant anywhere before, so I don't know how it compares to others, but it's the best food I think I've had in Charlottesville.
And do you get those on those Wednesdays when you have the
Those aren't the typical Wednesday croissants, but there was one of the offices in administration had a handful yesterday, and I had one. So yes, they are here at frequently.
Sharing is caring, right?
Yeah.
So you made a very good case for people coming to Darden. So Mera, I'm looking at you, and what is the admissions process like at Darden, given that it's completely case study based? Who are you specifically looking for?
Yeah. So we're still going to evaluate candidates holistically, looking at their academic profile, their professional and personal experiences, and those and personal qualities and characteristics. Because we teach in the case method, we're really looking for students who are, yes, smart, right? They can handle the academic rigors, but really students who are intellectually curious. They're going to want to dig into those cases. They're going to want to learn how to answer those questions and really collaborate with their classmates to come up with potential solutions. We also really need to find students who are open-minded and globally minded, right? Like you're going to be interacting with peers from all over the world, and you're going to be learning from them. And we really want students who are not only going to want to share their own experiences and talk in class, but be able to and excited about sitting back and listening, right? It's such an important process at Darden to sit back and listen and to learn from your peers. So as we evaluate candidates, we're going to be looking for those students who also are just going to sit back and listen and want to learn and grow by listening to their peers.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I would imagine that all of the networking and the informal gathering really supports the type of interpersonal skills that you develop and develop better when it is informal, but it's still growthful, right? Now, my realm is test prep, right? I've been dealing with tests for decades. I can't even believe I can say that, but I can. And I know that Darden was one of the first top business schools to accept a bouquet of tests, meaning the GMAT. I imagine you're doing the GMAT Focus, the GRE, the EA, and the MCAT and the LSAT even, which was super surprising. I think I learned that this summer when we saw each other, Merav. Now, you still offer a test waiver. So with changes with all these test formats, what's important for the AdCom at Darden, and what trends are you seeing in testing and the students that are coming in?
Yeah, so we do accept all those exams and do offer a test waiver application process because some candidates may not need a standardized test to prove their academic abilities, especially those with a quant background, either professionally or academically or both. And so we do offer a test waiver application process. But in general, what we're seeing is that many students will apply for a test waiver if they have kind of an accounting background, finance background, data analytics background, and then ultimately also take the test because for scholarship purposes, it's helpful to have that extra data point when we evaluate merit-based scholarships and we're looking at overall academic profiles. That's one more data point that we would like to have. And so we are still seeing folks submitting some test scores. But in general, test scores are not necessarily indicative of, how a candidate will perform in our classroom. And so if a candidate has an opportunity to apply for a test waiver, we do encourage them to do so.
I saw Joey shake his head when I mentioned tests. Is there something you want to share with us?
I think I took this route like 5 times. Yeah. So but honestly, more to prove to myself that I was going to be able to do the work when I got here than to prove to the admissions committee. And I think that having done all the prep and done the practice, I got to Darden and was like, I was able to do the math on the board in my head, which I probably would not have been able to do if I hadn't prepared for the GMAT. So this isn't advice one way or another in terms of admissions, but just for your own personal growth, I'm glad I struggled to perform in the GMAT and eventually overcame that.
I think it's a really good point too, of like, even as you're taking some courses, like if you're thinking about MBA programs and then you take an online accounting course and don't do as well, maybe rethinking some strategies for approaching the MBA, or hey, like you're finding that it's really easy and exciting, then take some additional courses. The more you can do to prep yourself before coming into an MBA program, the better off you're going to be, regardless of whether you end up in a case method style program like Darden or one that's more lecture based.
Yeah, I think that's really important, and I think we're seeing that. I feel like someone at Emory just wrote about they're looking at things other than grades. They're looking at test scores actually, and we work with students that are applying to colleges, and the tests do say they do something, and just like Joey, you said, like now you're so much more comfortable with the math that's on the board, so it is an opportunity for all students to look at each of the pieces, the accounting class, the test, the writing of essays as your own personal journey. And I mean, I personally think when people see that you're on that personal journey, it means that you're showing conviction, that you believe in yourself, and that you believe in your own growth, which is what you want a business leader to have, right? So that makes a lot of sense. And so MCAT and LSAT though, you accept those as well, huh?
We do, yes. So we have many dual degrees at Darden, including med students and law students. And so we will accept their MCAT scores or their LSAT scores so that they don't have to retest. I think our law school, though, also accepts the GMAT and the GRE. So for dual degrees applying at the same time, they're flexible. I believe the med school just takes the MCAT. I don't know how flexible they are, but they actually start off at the med school first anyway. So that's fine. But we do offer that flexibility as well, especially for students who are already enrolled in programs at UVA.
Sounds like a good icebreaker activity, right? Like don't tell other people what test that you took, and then have a placard that says I took the MCAT.
Yeah. We can guess based on their personality or what their dual
right, exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. But they're all really about critical thinking skills, ultimately.
Exactly.
They're all about how do you reason, which is super important for your case method, certainly. So that makes sense.
It allows the flexibility too for students who might not be as quant focused, like, maybe the GMAT might be a more rigorous test for them, and then the GRE or the LSAT is more, the logic and games section, which I actually really enjoyed taking when I took the LSAT. And so I think it allows that flexibility for the different types of test takers as well, and they're all going to be equally successful at Darden.
The GRE, for those of you who might not know this, used to have the game section on it.
So long ago.
I know. A long time ago when I started. And so it's super interesting how watching things morph. And we had a meeting with, I think with some GMAT folks. I'm like, why don't you put a game section on the GMAT? Yeah. That would be really fun. They didn't take my suggestion.
They're lost.
Maybe for the next version, Bara.
Maybe.
Yes. And thanks to Joey for sharing how long it took for the GMAT, because I'm sure that for some of the viewers out here and prospective applicants, that gives them a boost of confidence, and also the fact that they could attempt many things. And I know many people who specifically choose Darden because of this flexibility that's there in the test, and for some the flexibility gives them takes the stress off for them. And coming to another very critical point you mentioned, Joey, that it helps you prepare better. Let's talk academics. Darden is known for having some fantastic, super duper faculty. We had a chance to listen to one of them when we were there in Charlottesville at the EGAC conference. So I want to understand about how has it been learning the core fundamentals via the case studies, which is something very unique at Darden. And if you can just share some of your favorite stories about it, about the best teaching moments you all had.
Paths to power.
Am I starting?
Yeah.
So I come from a non-traditional background. I studied international relations and then did 5 years in the human resources. So accounting was outside of my scope of knowledge. Finance was outside of my scope of knowledge. And you get the gist, right? Core in its entirety was outside. And I think, so Darden has this thing called learning teams, which is a group of people that are from different sections, right? You don't necessarily go to the same class as you are in core, and you prepare cases together. And it's a great learning environment to be comfortable with failing, to be comfortable with talking. This is the way that I would approach this case. And then having somebody that maybe has a finance background say, well, I get why you would think that this other way is a little bit more simpler, for example, which you can imagine has happened so many times in a year. When you just think you're getting to the final round and realize there are way more simpler ways to get to that solution. And I think it's part of the learning environment that gets created here, where you get to really learn from your peers that can have different capabilities and experiences and knowledge. And so the learning teams are set up to help you along the way. And so in the case for me, that was a huge space where I could feel comfortable voicing my doubts, working through when I got stuck with cases. And so when I came into the classroom, it's not as if I felt that I was fully prepared. I think a lot of times you just have to get comfortable with not having all the answers and not being fully prepared. But at least you'd walk through multiple ways to approach the problem, and you were at least ready to start talking about it in the classroom. And so I think the learning team and that dynamic for me was, if you want, one of my biggest and most important aspects of core, because it gave me a little bit of the confidence that I was lacking because of my non-traditional background, to just say, okay, it's okay if I fail. I'm going to raise my hand, make a point, and just thank God that I talked about this the day before with my learning team. And even if it's not the perfect way, like, I am learning as I go and as I walk through core here at Darden.
Yeah, I think one of the hallmarks for the Darden academic experience is navigating ambiguity or incomplete information and becoming really comfortable and okay with that, because that will be what we face as business leaders when we graduate. And so an anecdote I'll share is from finance class. I also didn't have a huge quant background. I studied psychology and economics in undergrad, but spent most of my work experience in the wedding industry and then the nonprofit sector. So wasn't working a ton with hard numbers. But in finance class, I think for the first 5 weeks or so, I just felt, I'm just going to ask my questions, kind of get through it. But I think by the second to last class, where you're doing the exam from last year and you're really trying to push yourself and see how much of this can I conquer on my own, I answered a question and I felt confident about it. And my professor, I'll give a shout out to Mark Lipson, he asked me, how confident do you feel in your answer out of 10? And I said, 7 or 8. And he was like, great. I thought you were going to say 3. But I think that just shows you the growth. I think in the first week, I probably would have said 2 or 3. But I think by that, after just 7 weeks, the confidence growth that I felt individually, having zero kind of finance background, is a huge testament to just how much learning we actually accomplish.
I will just talk about the thing that I love most about the Darden classroom environment itself and the coursework, is that the professors are they're like an artist at work. They're like a music conductor, telling the drums to play now, the trumpets to play then. They know who in the room probably understood the case, different portions of the case better than other portions. And so at the beginning, they're like, okay, we're just looking for general case facts. Who's the protagonist? What's the decision being made? And they'll call on someone who probably had an Ines who had a good understanding of the HR involved and who the different interests of the different parties. And then they'll look at the finance person and be like, okay, well, what's the expected value of this decision? What's the expected value of this decision? And so at the beginning, they really focus on what your expertise is in, and they draw from the people in the room. And then by the end of the quarter, anyone in the room can answer any question, because you've learned the material over kind of the trajectory of the class. And what I think that shows is 2 things. One, you're learning, right? If you're able to answer things by the end. But 2, how much the professors actually invest in getting to know their students, so that before you walk into the room, they know who's going to be able to answer what questions they haven't even asked yet. I think is kind of an amazing thing that all the professors I've had here have been able to do. I don't know if it's true across the board, but I would imagine it is.
I think it takes a certain type of faculty to want to teach in a case method style program, because it's so much more difficult, right? They're not just going into a classroom space, throwing up a PowerPoint, lecturing, taking a couple questions and leaving. They really have to facilitate this discussion that could go in multiple directions. And how do they then guide it towards sometimes maybe the right or multiple right answers, to the point, right? How do they get that point across? And how do they get that point across multiple sections. So they really do. So Ines mentioned that the students have learning teams, but faculty essentially have learning teams as well, where they work together within their section to figure out, okay, what are some of the common goals we would like for the classes to achieve or learn, common learnings that we want them to get from each case, and how do we get the conversation, regardless of which way it goes, to end on those points. And so I think that's why we have some of the best faculty, per the rankings over the last, I don't know how many years now.
The way that you describe it reminds me of why weaves are so strong, right? That there's these weaves that are happening on multiple levels. And one thing you guys didn't mention, but you're also learning from each other. And it's also, you're getting this great modeling of, and in being a leader, being comfortable with calling on the different people on the teams that you're working with to recreate that dynamic where the teams learn from each other, but also feel comfortable in the ways that they don't feel comfortable initially, but that they're going to grow into feeling more comfort. So I think that's really, I mean, what an amazing life skill, right? That's not like, that's a great business skill. That's a great life skill. It's a great parenting skill. I mean, that's just an incredible way to move through it, to move through the program. So talking about weaves, just speaking specifically to the students, we talked a little bit about this, but we didn't get into the weeds. How do you utilize and interact with the larger academic community, the larger UVA community?
I can kick us off because I am a dual degree student. So I'm also in the Public Policy and Leadership School over on Main Grounds. And so I physically am there as well. So I'm in the rotunda, I'm on the lawn. So being in that physical space and just having that reminder that this is such a larger community than just the 700 students at the full-time residential program. But I'm also part of certain fellowships that are offered across the graduate program. So the Tri-Sector Fellowship Program, which brings together folks from the law school, the public policy school, as well as Darden. And so just seeing how these folks kind of approach problems, the questions that they ask, it's been like a really fun opportunity to, again, learn from others and the way that they would think about things, and kind of use this time in grad school as an experiment or like a learning lab to test out different approaches and stretch the ways that I might instinctively approach things.
For me, I think it has been more about connecting through college sports. So I've learned the songs, I chatted with everybody around me. I became best friends with somebody in the UVA basketball by going there and a couple of times sitting beside them, and suddenly I'm part of, it feels like I'm part, at least connecting way more with the broader community here in UVA. And very, very different to what I experienced back at home. And so I really wanted to get that mentality or rooting for a team. And suddenly you understand that these are all students that are dedicating so much time to just perform then later in their games and stuff. And so how I've connected the most has definitely been through that, since I've been to almost every UVA football game. I've been to every UVA basketball game. I've gone to field hockey, soccer, a bunch of different events throughout. And I think it's nice to feel that you're part of a way bigger space and community, and not just the Darden community.
I have nothing to add to those answers.
Merav, did you want to talk a little bit about it, just from the administrative side?
Yeah, so I mean, Darden allows for students to take, I think it's up to 6 credits across in other programs as well. So if educationally they want to expand to the rest of the UVA community, we also have a lot of ways for our students to engage in the Charlottesville community through like community consulting projects and volunteering opportunities. Our students do a ton of volunteering in the Charlottesville community. And so we really do provide them access. Like we talked about this earlier, Charlottesville is a smaller area. Most of the people that live or around this area are somehow connected with UVA. So they're bound to interact with folks, whether it be in the grocery store, while they're on Main Grounds, while they're at, vineyards or restaurants or wherever they happen to be during their time, even though it's only 2 years here.
And moving on to another important area, which is like, what are some of the industries that Darden MBA grads specialize in, and how has the current macroeconomic situation been affecting these jobs?
So Darden is a general management program. We don't specialize in anything, even though students have the ability to have concentrations or specializations in particular areas, they don't have to. So we very much are applicable to all industries. A majority of our students, by majority, I mean about 46% go into consulting. Case method lends itself very nicely to consulting. About 26 or so percent will go into the financial services areas. About 10 or so percent will go into tech, and then other industries as well. And so in terms of recruiting, we're seeing the same trends nationally as other institutions, but in the last class, we've seen still very high placement rates in companies like Amazon, Bank of America, BCG, McKinsey, JP Morgan Chase, Microsoft, et cetera, with, still, I think for the 5th year in a row now, reporting that, the highest mean average in terms of a salary, I think about 167 or 168 K. So, we're still doing really well in terms of recruiting. I think students having positive experiences recruiting for their internships. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong. And then now, going in for their full-time roles.
How about international, global? I mean, how is Darden going global, both in industries, but also in the studies that you're doing?
Yeah. So one of the ways that Darden goes global is with a scholarship. So all of our students are offered what's called the Batten Scholarship to have a Darden worldwide experience of some kind. They can either apply it to a global consulting project, or they can apply it to what's called a Darden worldwide course. These courses are about 7 to 9 days. They typically focus on a particular subject matter in one country or a small grouping of countries. They're led by a faculty, and it's usually a cohort of about 25 to 30 or so students. And it really gives them an opportunity to do a deep dive into a particular subject area and explore globally, an area that they might not have already been to. I think you all went DWCs, right? Ines, where did you go?
I went to Iceland.
And what did you say?
Sorry. A very interesting place. And our focus was more around sustainability, thinking about how they are very much into renewable resources and how their whole energy system is tied together. We ended up going to a couple of different companies, very latest technology, thinking through how to be more sustainable, how to create circular economies, how greenhouses, how to be strategic when you don't have sun for habit, stuff like that on how to be very strategic on businesses working with the natural resources that they have and really taking advantage of those, for example.
I went to Israel, and our focus was on how it's startup nation, and we had a lot of firms that we visited that were very much tech firms, and we explored AI a lot, which was really interesting to me, having, again, not a huge tech background or AI background, and just seeing the different applications and how the culture of Israel kind of really helped it foster this startup nation, the capabilities and the kind of scrappiness to make those things happen.
And I went to Japan, and our course was focused kind of around this innovation side of Japan, but more like the tradition that Japan is known for. And so how they're trying to kind of bridge the gap between the traditional culture and then moving into how are they going to innovate and kind of compete on the global stage. But really, I think my course was a food tour of all the best ramen and sushi in Tokyo. So yeah, those trips are very fun. And you're there with 20 of your classmates. And so you get to know that group really well. And usually they're people that you might not have known, a couple of your close friends, and then a couple of people that just ended up on the same trip, and they all come away being your close friends. So
same course, right? There's content you're learning.
Oh no, yeah, course content.
Try to get them not to call it trips. It's a fun experience, but it's also course. And you find that it's also a great networking opportunity, right? Getting to know your peers. And so while it's great to do a lot of global cases in the classroom, but to have that hands-on, more experiential learning opportunity is extremely important. We find that a lot of students, I think they had mentioned this earlier, they don't want to leave Charlottesville. It's 2 years and they want to get as much time here as possible. So they may not want to do a full exchange program, even though we do offer them. Not many students take advantage of it. And we get exchange students here at Darden for a quarter or a semester. But these opportunities allow for them to do that deep dive, to get a cultural immersion. A lot of them will do actual trips beyond their DWCs. And so they'll go either a couple days before or stay a couple days after and do more country exploration. And so that's been really, really great. And then also they'll just do fun trips together abroad, and I'll come back sick.
No, and I think just to be clear, like you get to you spend the year looking at all these cases, talking about different countries, right? You have your peers talking about experiences in different countries, and suddenly with the DWC, right, with this worldwide course, you're sitting at a company talking to people that are actually having local problems, and you're just trying to work through with them and really tackle, okay, what is the managerial decision you have to do? What is the issue that you're having? And so you sort of get that experience of going into companies that can have completely different problems that you could have imagined, or similar problems that you discussed in class. And so that trickles down together to be very experiential and getting to understand, okay, what does a company in Iceland have as issues? What are the risks? How are we mitigating them? And so it becomes a classroom in a different country, at a different company. And it's very impressive to see how the class work that you've done throughout the year trickles down into this amazing program that Darden has.
It probably also brings in a lot of just diversity, right? All of a sudden you're dealing in Japan, I would imagine, mostly a Japanese employees, right?
Yeah.
And what that culture is like, Israeli as well as Icelandic, right? So all of a sudden you're dealing with like, I don't want to say other, but like other homogeny that you're not necessarily used to. And then so the diversity there, I think, would probably kick in your own, like, oh wow, this is different. How am I going to respond to the differences here, instead of a class like you're in, which has diversity, but it's fully diverse, right? Like there's a lot of the countries that you mentioned, I would imagine, they're diverse in different ways, but you kind of have to get into the country to see how their diversity plays out, right? And that makes you great leaders. So it's great that Darden gives that amazing opportunity. I want to go. When do I get to?
That's the perk of the job at Darden. We can apply actually to be staff coordinators. That's how I got yeah, about a year and a half ago, I got to go as a staff coordinator. So essentially supporting the faculty. It's a glorified babysitting job. There's nothing that needs to be done.
No, it's a course, not a trip. It's a course.
It's a glorified babysitting of the course. I had to take attendance and make sure that they got on the bus. That was really important. And if they were doing something that they weren't supposed to be doing, I made sure that they got the cold call. That was my job, to have the faculty give them the cold call.
That sounds fun.
Wow.
It was fun.
And now, like you said, this was a scholarship, right? Is it from who like made it possible?
Batten, a very generous donation through our Batten scholarship, that it pays for their accommodations during the course, meals and whatnot, anything to do with the course itself, transportation to and from the different locations. If there's a cultural visit, it'll pay for the fees, entrance fees and everything like that. Students pay for other meals, flights, and then any other arrangements that they'd like to make during that time.
Wow. So I already see evidence of amazing alums who have been so supportive and extending the tradition at Darden. So what are your alumni currently doing, and what kind of services exist for them at Darden?
Yeah, so other than donating millions of dollars, I think the biggest way that alumni give back for me in admissions is working with our prospective students. And being really accessible to prospective students, to newly admitted students, and providing that guidance as they're going through the application process, sharing their experiences, showing up when we do fairs all across the world, when we do panels, when we host different admitted student programming, alumni show up. And just a number that really surprised me when I first started at Darden. I actually had to turn alumni away and say, no, I'm sorry, we were only allowed to have 2 people. I had 5 wanting to come to this one small event. And so that's, I think, their just generosity. And it also just speaks to the experience that they had here, and how much they want to give back. They're also giving back through like career services and helping and coming back. I mean, I saw alumni here as early as, I think it was like 3 weeks after graduation, recruiting. Or like, talking about, just like right after, maybe it wasn't 3 weeks, but like right after summer, coming back and recruiting for their companies. And so they are just really hungry to get back on grounds, talk to their peers, talk to their, their graduate students here, the MBA students here, and really kind of get them to come in and recruit for their companies. And so they do give back in a number of ways, making recommendations of students. I mean, I don't know how many of you all went throughout your process and talked to alumni before, during your time here at Darden, but that's how I've seen it.
Another great example, both Alyssa and I were in the same class. We just came out of a class with a speaker who is an alumni who has joined this class to help share her experience. And so you get to also connect with alumni through classes where they get to share what their experience is like and how that ties to what you're seeing in that class. And so honestly, I've seen so many alumni participate in different types of classroom experiences and just sharing what their experience is like. So very much a giving back, a trying to connect with the current students so that this is a circle that everybody's collaborating and still being part of the community, even if you're not here sitting in class.
And one of the really cool things I think about being a Darden student at the University of Virginia when it comes to alumni is Darden is a very small school, so there's not that many alumni, so they really want to take care of a Darden student. But the University of Virginia is a pretty big school, and so if you go anywhere in the world and you see someone with like a UVA hat, which there probably will be someone with a UVA hat, you can talk to them about Charlottesville and like, yeah, maybe they went to the undergrad or the med school or the law school, but they all know Bodo's Bagels, right? Mm-hmm. So you can instantly build that connection with them. And so Darden is this cool place where it's like you have an amazing, really tight, protective kind of Darden alumni that want to take care of you, and then also this expansive UVA network that will be a friend in whatever corner of the globe you're in. I think it's really special.
Yeah. In my previous role, I worked for undergrad admission at UVA, and when I would plan programs globally, I would have alumni from all programs show up, and I think actually Darden showed up the most. When I was in China, I had a Darden alum. When I was in Hong Kong, I had a Darden alum. India, Darden alum. Even for undergraduate programs. So they really are just excited to share their UVA experience with prospects and admitted students.
Yeah, and when it's this cool, I think you're making the rest of us jealous. But yeah, that brings us to the end of today's episode. What I heard was close-knit, collaborative, community-oriented, connected, college sports, and of course, cool international exposure avenues. That's what Darden has to offer, and so much more. A big thanks to Ines, Alyssa, Joey, and Merav today for sharing the insights. And please don't forget to click the like button if you enjoyed today's episode, and be sure to subscribe for tons of free tips and to get up and close and personal with some of the top ranked business school programs. And see you same place next week. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.